Good afternoon, friends. So I arrived in Nuremberg yesterday. I'm headed into town to check out the Frauenkirche, the cathedral, a few other places. I'm doing a recon for tomorrow, but I'm currently walking past the Nuremberg Palace of Justice. This was the location of the Nuremberg trials in 1945 and 1946. They chose this place because it already had courtrooms and it already had a prison out back, and also because it had been untouched by the quite serious pounding that Nuremberg took in the latter stages of the war, being a very serious Nazi kind of place, symbolic as it were. Anyway, Hitler, Himmler and Goebbels had all committed suicide, and just before the Red Army took Berlin, some 35 men were put on trials here for primarily war crimes, for being part and parcel and perpetrating one of the greatest crimes in the history of the world, the Holocaust. Prime among them were von Ribbentrop, who was the foreign minister, Hermann Goering, of course, who was the head of the Luftwaffe and died in the wool Nazi from the beginning, and Karl Dönitz, who was an admiral of the Navy and a staunch Nazi. The trial went on for 261 days, quite a long time actually. Just Goering's defense took some 80 days. Eventually, many of them were sentenced to be hung, including Goering. Rudolf Hess, who, despite being the deputy Führer and despite being the man who imprisoned along with Hitler in 1923, had written down Mein Kampf as Hitler dictated it, he had, if not defected, he had flown to Britain and surrendered himself in 1941, very early on in the war really, when Germany was certainly still winning. He was imprisoned in Spandau prison, and I actually remember when he died. Goering cheated. When he was sentenced, he stated that he wanted to be shot as a military man instead of hung like a criminal. That petition was refused, and he bit into a potassium cyanide capsule the night before he was meant to be hung on the 15th of October 1946. It's still quite the matter of contention of how he got the thing, but yes. Anyway, so I'm headed into town. I'll keep you posted. That's the Frauenkirche, which tickled my dad because his name's Lawrence. It's one of the two Protestant churches in Nuremberg. It's the one this side of the river. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Nemesti Miru. That's really quite fun. It's almost a freestanding organ, which is cool. Again, friends, so I'm standing in the Frauenkirche, a Catholic church, the Church of Our Lady, and I must admit it's substantially smaller than I thought it would be. It's kind of almost square. except for the nave at the end. It's very pretty though. It had, at least in my mind, dark beginnings, because after the outbreak of the Black Death in 1349, there was a pogrom against the Jewish inhabitants of the city. There was a rumour going around that they were poisoning the water, and so they were expelled from the city. And Charles IV, the Bohemian king, the Czech king, and also at the time the Holy Roman Emperor, declared that a church should be built on the same site as the synagogue they had just destroyed. So construction continued until about 1360. Charles IV's son, Wenceslas, was baptized here in 1361. He was a remarkably useless person. His nickname was the Idol, despite the fact he was king of Germany and Bohemia for a considerable period of time. Anyway, this place was almost completely destroyed during the bombing of Nuremberg in World War II, which is why the majority of it looks really quite fresh. There are some remaining frescoes on the walls because the walls of the nave were still standing, but it was almost completely destroyed. But it does have some really quite tasteful artwork on the pillars that are of the period, and the altar, of course. Remarkably, when the Reformation happened and Protestantism was sweeping Europe, this place was taken over by the Lutherans and became Protestant for 2 centuries, until 1810, when it was taken over again by the Catholic Church. Anyway. I kind of like this. It's a little antechamber for people to light candles and has these asymmetric little brackets in the walls. I'm assuming that it used to be a staircase because you have the windows going up, and that was destroyed in World War II, and this is what they did with it, which I think is quite good, actually. It's a nice little room. So the main square here in Nuremberg. Behind me is the Schönen Brunnen, which just literally means beautiful fountain. It has these quite fun little scoops that one would use if it was functioning to dip into the water and then drink out of, literally. It has these 2 little brass rings that are supposed to be good luck if you turn them. So I did, you know, come on. Anyway, yeah, I'm hungry now. So, as keen viewers might have noticed, I'm wearing a new pair of sunglasses. I finally succumbed to temptation after 4 different cities and 4 different Ray-Ban stores, and bought this glorious pair of Caravan Reverse G10 Ray-Bans. No regrets, but it has completely wiped out what I laughingly refer to as my luxuries budget. So for the next 3 weeks until I fly back to Britain for a month, I'm eating in, I'm being super responsible and extra careful with money. That said, I can spare €5 for this. I'm in a little place called Bratwursthausel, just off the main square, as I said, with the cathedral as my backdrop, sitting in the evening sunshine with some very decent beer. So there's that. So I realise, of course, that preconceptions, like assumptions, are the mother of all fuck-ups. But with my education and all of the rest, whenever I heard about Nuremberg, I thought of the trials and the rallies. But I have to say, this city is just beautiful. Really, really lovely. I mean, it's just beautiful. Anyway. For the romantics among you, hopeless or otherwise. Friends. So I'm in the, if you like, it's not the cathedral, but it is the main church of Nuremberg, St. Sebalds. There are two major Protestant churches in the city, this being the primary, the other being Frauenkirche on the other side of the river. And this one is the biggest by far, and also the oldest. Construction began in 1225 and continued because they added parts like a chancellery on one side. They heightened the spires and made them more ornate all the way up until the 16th century. And also started off being Romanesque style and ended up being a little more Gothic. And also in the 16th century they had a massive refurbishment of the interior to a more Baroque style. Big place. And I must admit, I really like it. St. Sebalds, for whom it's named, was an 8th century missionary and hermit. So if you imagine a holy man who only owns a staff and a blanket, you're pretty much there. He's the patron saint of Bavaria, and this is his place. I do like this. I don't quite know why, because you've got a very large organ over here. The scale is huge. I come up to about there. And also they have this one, which is a portable organ on wheels. No idea. So as I said, this place was seriously damaged during World War II, at the end of World War II, with the bombing of Nuremberg, and was completely restored and refurbished, and really to a very smart degree. You can see old frescoes all over the place. I took a video of that one over there, but all of that is original. And then behind me, up there, you can see various degrees of repairs in the brickwork. I don't know quite what that is on the pillar. It's obviously a decoration, but I'm not sure how old it is or if all the pillars were covered in that. a modern and yet somewhat macabre new door. What fantastic timing. Right, something decidedly less fun. That is a Judensaal. They were prevalent quite a lot in the 1300s. You have to understand, of course, that this is 700 years ago, at a time in the early Middle Ages, when superstition was rife, when blame was rampant. The Black Death had swept the continent, and of course, people were looking for someone to blame. In this city, it was the Jews. Essentially, it is two Jews engaged in obscene acts with a female pig. Honestly, I get that history and, to a certain degree, art, if you want to call it that, but I'm actually quite surprised it's still up there. Really, considering. Anyway. Sometimes I dislike humans. I'm trying to work out the symbolism here, actually.